some familiar faces and some that are not so familiar. And thank you all for coming. And for those who I know, it means a great deal to me right here that you took time from your day to be here today. It means more than you could possibly know. I'd like to thank Denise and Lynn, who have helped me so much with this exhibit, including hanging the actual canvases. The secret story that only you will know, because you were here today, is that I had them all lined up, all at the top, all around, and they were right next to each other. And between Lynn and Denise, they kept saying to me, "Are you sure you wouldn't like to put some below that, put some at eye level?" And I said, well, ultimately I knew that they were right. So I ultimately said, well, I really would like that, but quite honestly, I don't have the time and I don't have the energy. I know some of you are looking at me and saying, what? Mr. Grosky doesn't have the time. But I was wiped out. So they said, no, don't worry about it. We'll take care of it. And so while I spent the rest of that day putting out the little tags, they spent the rest of the day rearranging the whole exhibit and putting a second and a third row, and it's very much appreciated. I know, still looking at it, if I hadn't tried to jam 51 photos in here, then you'd have more space to stand back and look at one with a lot of white around it, which would probably be better. But I was eager to display a lot of what I've been collecting, and I still have. This is probably about half of my collection of world canvases, and I probably have another 50 from the United States. So still a lot stored at home. I want to thank especially my beloved and lovely wife Ann, and my son Josh, my daughter Mariah, and my son-in-law Craig, who couldn't be here today. So we'll visit the exhibit later on, but Ann is my rock, and any success that I've had in this life has been directly due to her efforts. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
To me, I've been, I'll acknowledge how fortunate I am to be able to have done the traveling that I've done. Ann and I, we have a lot of gift cards for restaurants at home that we have to use, but we rarely go out to restaurants. And let's see, my daughter says that the latest word, I told her I don't like it, she says, well, you're kind of frugal, Dad. And I said, I don't like that. Well, you are. I said, well, I save my money so we can do things that I want to do, because experiences are so much more valuable than things that you collect. And traveling around the world, to me, showed both a uniqueness of cultures, a uniqueness of sites and buildings. It's incredible. I mean, as I'm right here, the Ponte Vecchio. I just always heard about that bridge in Florence. It was astounding to be there. And Portofino was on a cruise. We'd never been there. I'd never heard of Portofino. I knew it was on an itinerary. But then we got into this gorgeous fishing village, and I said, wow, this is amazing. And we had a cruise that ended in Portugal, in Lisbon, and I did some studying on Lisbon, and I said, well, this is ridiculous. We get off the cruise, and then we go to the airport and go home. And this looks like a fantastic city. So we instead booked 3 days in Lisbon, and it turned out to be absolutely amazing. The Tower of Belém, I would have liked to catch it at a time when I had a nice sunset, but I still loved it. And this is, just the Guggenheim here in Bilbao, Spain. That was I included the people here because I wanted to show the difference in size here, how enormous that sculpture was. And then there are places that I always thought that I'd go to or hoped that I'd go to, finding myself, outside Big Ben, which was an emotional experience, but even more of an emotional experience going to the American cemetery there in France. So I can't tell you how many amazing experience I've had thanks to traveling. To arrive in Israel, in Tel Aviv, and see the sunset, and see this sculpture of a heart in a place that I thought I would never ever get to. It moves me in ways that I can only begin to describe to you. At the same time, visiting these places give you a sense of the commonality of individuals, because we talk a lot about the American dream. The idea of owning, a plot of land and a home and having a family. It's probably a car is part of that. But the American dream, we may call it the American dream, but it's a world dream. Every single person I've ever had the good fortune to meet in any continent whatsoever, whether it's Asia or Africa or anywhere else, they all want their own version of that dream. They all want to have a decent home where they can raise their children. And it makes us realize two things. One is how similar people are, how much we have in common, but also how fortunate we are. It's why, some of you see me on Facebook, it's why I published the meme that says, it's not mine, I borrowed it, we borrow so many things on Facebook, but it says something like, instead of sitting around and complaining about the price of gas going from $4.50 to $500, maybe we could think how lucky it is that we have a bed to sleep in, that we're not sleeping in a subway, we're not worried about being dragged from our homes. So sometimes we forget that, and traveling around the world, again, gives you the opportunity to see how much we have in common with other people, but also how fortunate we are. And it also gives us a chance to sometimes see. We don't say this because there's this, I think this country is fantastic. But we have this idea in the United States that everything we have here is the best anywhere, that we can't learn from anybody else. And yet when you travel the world, you see that there is so much that we have to learn from other countries and from other cities. And if we could simply continue with the same patriotism we have and get rid of the notion that we're best in terms of everything and that nobody has anything to teach us, we would all be a lot better off. I know that Denise was kind enough when they interviewed her for the paper to say that I was through my photos I was able to give a glimpse of humanity and a glimpse of the global family. And that has been important to me in my life. And we have a saying in my culture, which is Judaism, which is called Tikkun Olam, which means that the world is broken. And it is our job to try to heal the world. And it's not just try, it's certainly important to heal our parts of our own country, which definitely need attention. But that doesn't mean we can turn our backs on our brothers and sisters elsewhere in the world. That it's very important. It's extremely important to have prayers. My memes say that all over Facebook. To have prayers for the people in Ukraine. But it's also important to do what we can to help, whether that is sending supplies or contributing money, or holding a vigil as they did in Orange today. When my wife and I first started traveling, I look back and I say we didn't do anything for the first 15 years of our marriage. We took our honeymoon in the Bahamas, and then I think one summer we spent 2 or 3 days in Montreal, and that was about it. And then for our 15th anniversary, we thought we'd do something special, so we took a cruise, and we went on what turned out to be my least favorite cruise line, Carnival, Fun Ship. But at the time, we didn't know any better. We said, "Oh, this is amazing!" And we said, "We're going to have to do this again. Maybe for our 20th anniversary, we'll take another cruise." Well, we lasted 2 years until our 17th anniversary, where we did another cruise, and another one on our 18th, and our 19th, and our 20th, etc. And we visited most of the small islands in the Caribbean, and they were fantastic. We don't regret that for a second. It was absolutely amazing, beautiful. We got to meet so many wonderful people. But at that point, and I know it sounds a little spoiled, I don't mean it to sound that way, but at that point we said, well, is this all there is? I mean, is this all that traveling's about? You know, going to a nice warm place and seeing turquoise water and going back to the ship and having a great meal in the dining room. And so we decided, no, we have to stretch our wings a little bit, and we went to Alaska, which we thought was a big adventure, and we enjoyed it. And being able to walk, land, take a helicopter and land on the Mendenhall Glacier was awesome. But then we decided we wanted to see Europe. And now that we'd seen that we could go all the way to Alaska, we figured, okay, how much further is Europe? And then for another 6 or 7 years, we were cruising around Europe, and we had the good fortune to be able to probably see probably about 45 or 50 different cities. Some of them were for a couple of days, most of them were just for 1 day. And we kept saying, we'll have to come back someday. You know, they said, cruising is great for seeing things for a day or two, but then you got to come back for a week and stay for a week or two. And that's when we started believing that. And through Tout Tours, we were able to, first of all, go to Tanzania and Kenya and see the extraordinary landscapes there, people there, and who were really warm and kind and generous. And then finally, animals, the big five around every turn. So as I was telling Mike, who is a sensational photographer, I actually like to give you a hand for Mike Phillips. Mike does so much for our communities here of Athol and Orange. He donates his time all the time to take photos of kids in schools and sports. And you've probably seen some of his photography there on Facebook. How many photos do you think you have between your computers, Mike?
Couple 100,000.
Yeah, at least. And I would say probably more like 500,000.
Well, since I started taking pictures with digital, I'm about 1.5 million pictures.
There we go. There we go. I was explaining to him that in Tanzania and Kenya, the wildlife, you see a pride of lions, for example, and if they're there for 5 or 6 minutes, you can, especially with a digital camera, you're maybe taking anywhere between 200 and 400 photos. So when you see one picture of a lion up there, that is the best close-up of a lion I have out of all those photos. And I came back from Africa with about 15,000 photos, and I spent about 2 months editing about 2,000 of them, I guess. So about 13,000 I never touched, about a couple thousand I ended up editing. And I probably ordered canvases of about 20 or 25 of them. And in the books that I have there, I probably have about 200 or 300 photos. So it was an amazing trip. From there, we decided where we want to go next. And again, I'm turning 71 this summer. I always tell people in my 71st year, even though I'm 70 years old. And so I'm always saying to myself, I don't know how much time I have left. We don't know how much time any of us have left. But I really don't know. I know, my wife and I have some conditions, so we don't know if we got 2 years left, 5 years left, 10 years, or 15 years. We have no idea. But we're determined to maximize the time and not to, to the extent that we can, we don't want to wait. So we decided to go to China. But when we went to book a tour to China, we found out that it was all booked up. So then I said, all right, so where do we want to go? What's on our bucket list that we can go to instead of China? And it was Israel and Jordan. And Jordan really wasn't on my bucket list. I mean, the lost city of Petra was amazing, absolutely sensational, and I've got one photo out there. But it was Israel that I wanted to go to because I have my entire culture in Judaism is important to me. I was co-president of Temple Israel, and as I was telling our reporter who was here from the Athol Daily News, that in Israel, at the end of the Jewish New Year, you always say goodbye to people, and you say, next year in Jerusalem. And there's that call, next year in Jerusalem. But I never thought that would come true. You know, that was just something you said. And suddenly I had a chance to go to Jerusalem and to spend, I think it was 10 days in Israel, seeing Jewish sites and seeing Christian sites, and another 3 days in Petra, Jordan. And I can only begin to tell you what it felt like to be standing outside the Western Wall, what Jews call the Wailing Wall, because it's the remains of our temple, and to be able to write a prayer and to insert it in the cracks between the wall. And I remember being there, and I sang Jerusalem of Gold, and some people came around and they asked if they could lay tefillin on me, which is a certain kind of garb that we wear, or attachment that we wear that has verses of the Bible in it, verses of the Torah, and I said a prayer. Of course, while I was doing that, the rest of the group, along with my wife, was leaving because I missed the deadline. So I found myself at the Western Wall saying, where is everybody? And I fortunately had a fairly good memory. Our hotel was only about a mile or a mile and a half from the Western Wall. And I fortunately was able to find my way back. But I did miss the deadline, which was to be someplace at 1:40, I think it was. I think I got there at 1:45, and everybody was gone. I want to say that in Israel, I was fortunate enough. There were about 12 major sites that we went, or 12 major cities, I should say, lots of major sites. And one of those was Caesarea. Caesarea was a seaport that Herod had transformed. And it was dedicated to Augustus Caesar. And they had there the remains of a Roman amphitheater that had held 20,000 people at the time. And still, their remains were, you could probably have sat 16,000 people there, because the stonework was so good. And while I was there, some of you know me, and you know I tend to be theatrical. And so all the people were listening. Now Ian knows I do this anyway, because all the people are listening to the tour guide. And I, of course, am wandering around with my camera, taking pictures of what I want, and I'm only half listening to anything that the tour guide is saying, unless it really strikes my fancy. Because for the most part, I've heard most of it as I do research before I go. In any case, we're approaching this amphitheater. It's stretched out like this, and I go something like, I forget what I said, but it was something like, to be or not to be! Actually, I want to hear my voice reverberate. And the tour guide, who was an Israeli tour guide, looked at me and said, wait just a second, I'll give you a chance to test that voice of yours. So she finished what she was saying. She finished what she was saying, and then she said, now it's your turn. Would you like to say anything? And I said, well, could I sing something? And she said, of course. So there were our group was about 30, and there were about another 40 tourists from all over the world. And I thought an appropriate thing at the time would be to sing the Israeli national anthem, which is pretty short. I'm going to sing it for you right now, very short. The translation is, as long as within our hearts the Jewish soul sings, as long as forward to the east to Zion looks the eye, our hope is not yet lost. it is 2,000 years old, to be a free people in our land, the land of Zion and Jerusalem. And it goes like this. Kol od balevav penima nefesh Yehudi homiya ufate mitzrach kadima ayin letzion Sophia od lo avda tikvatenu ha-tikva bat shnot alpayim liot am chofshi be'artzenu Eretz Zion Yerushalayim liot am chofshi be'artzenu Eretz Zion Yerushalayim. So that was